Just before I could marry into the Earl's mansion as I wished, my identity as a fake daughter of a noble family was exposed. From then on, I fell from being a noble lady to a small-town girl 1,000 miles away. My biological parents ran a tofu shop, and my fiancé was a sturdy butcher. Here, it felt as if I had truly come to life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. My marriage to Guu. The eldest legitimate son of the Earl of Pingyang was arranged since we were children. The Earl of Pingyang's household is a prestigious noble family with high expectations for their daughter-in-law. Therefore, from the moment I could remember, my life's goal has been singular: to become a suitable daughter-in-law for the Earl's household. However, I was not naturally gifted. Beneath 10 slender fingers, countless strings have snapped from relentless practice. Through countless nights spent reading by lamplight, I've only begun to grasp a fraction of the mysteries spanning ancient and modern history. Fortunately, through daily diligence, I've finally earned the reputation as the capital's talented maiden. On the second day after my coming-of-age ceremony, the Earl of Pingyang's household has sent the betrothal gifts. Grandmother looked at the list of betrothal gifts and sighed. "Ah Wu, I fear your future days will not be easy," what grandmother said. I naturally understood as well. If one were to look only at the meager betrothal gifts listed on the sheet, it would be hard to believe that these were items sent by a noble household of royal kinship, a count's estate. After all, my father is merely a fifth-rank civil official. To have secured a marriage alliance with a count's estate, thanks to my grandmother's blessings, is already a stroke of ancestral fortune. How could I expect anything else? I smiled and comforted my grandmother, telling her not to worry. After I marry into their family, I will definitely be filial to my in-laws, take good care of my husband, and manage the household affairs well. After all, everyone has a heart of flesh and blood. I don't believe that if I treat others with sincerity, the people in the Earl's mansion would treat me poorly. Grandmother gently patted my back with deep affection, her tone full of pride. My wooer is naturally the best girl in the world. Just ignore all those who say you're marrying above your station. In my opinion, whoever marries wooer is truly blessed. I giggled foolishly and snuggled into grandmother's arms, acting coquettishly. But I can't bear to leave you. After that day, my marriage was openly put on the agenda. I was ready and at peace, waiting to be married. But just over a month before the wedding day, my father brought home a young woman. He said she was the true daughter of the Jiang family. And I was merely the one who had been mistakenly taken during the chaos of childbirth. The jade pendant and birthmark on Jiang Guan silently accuse me of all these years I've been occupying another's place. At last I understand. Why, since childhood, have I always felt that my parents were not close to me, and were even overly harsh? I had always thought that my father and mother valued propriety and did not like being overly affectionate with their children. And since I was to be the future mistress of the Earl's household, I should follow the rules in every way. But now I understand that my parents had long known I was not their biological daughter. Mother's body was no longer suitable for childbirth. But they didn't want to miss the opportunity to form a marriage alliance with the Earl's household, so they had no choice but to silently accept me. Now the true daughter has returned, naturally. The one to marry into the Earl's household would no longer be me. My father's expression was cold. All these years we've been a loving father and filial son. It can be considered that we've fulfilled our destined bond. You should leave now. My heart ached intensely. Could it be that all these years of devoted care and service couldn't earn me a place to stay in this family? The next day, while I was still in my dreams, my luggage was packed and I was sent aboard a small boat heading south. Far away, waiting for me were not only my biological parents, but also the butcher Gao, who was originally engaged to Jiang Guan. Life in Gutian town was different from what I had imagined. My parents ran a small shop selling tofu, before dawn broke each day. They were already busy lighting the fire, grinding the beans, and boiling the soy milk. Several times I tried to join and help, but my father and mother took turns pushing me back. "You're a young lady raised right under the emperor's feet. How could you do such rough work?" That's right. Go back and sleep a little longer," my mother said, rubbing her hands together as she spoke. "It seems that every time they face me, their helplessness and guilt are clearly visible. But what have they done wrong? The seemingly wealthy and noble life of a young lady that I appear to have was not lost because of them. They also don't know that I have been living cautiously and carefully in the capital. My family couldn't help, so I could only take a walk on the street. It was quite unexpected. Though I grew up in the bustling imperial capital, the liveliness of the market in Gutian town dazzled my eyes. The young man selling clay figures and candied hawthorn, seeing my curiosity, piled on smiles and tried hard to sell to me. My mother's words once echoed in my ears, "Jiang Wu, you are the future daughter-in-law of the Earl's household. Appearing in public and engaging in vulgar market affairs would bring shame upon the entire family." I hesitated for a few seconds, then I took out copper coins from my purse, but I am no longer that person now. The young man happily took it and handed me the largest candied hawthorn skewer. The aunt selling pinwheels nearby, seeing my generosity, immediately held up a handful of pinwheels and came up to me. "Miss, take a look at my pinwheels. If they don't spin, you don't pay." By the time I returned home laden with bags large and small, my parents were dumbfounded. "Daughter, are you planning to open a general store?" I didn't catch on right away. Mom nudged Dad with her elbow. "What nonsense are you talking? If our daughter likes buying things, let her buy them. How much could these little trinkets possibly cost?" She looked at me with a doting smile. "As long as my daughter is happy." The little pinwheel was placed on the table by my bed. At night, the bean-sized candlelight cast a dim yellow glow throughout the room. Propping my chin in my hands at the table, I blew a gentle breath toward the little pinwheel. The little windmill spun rapidly. Watching it, I found myself smiling inexplicably. So there was someone who didn't care whether what I did was right or wrong, but only cared about whether I was happy. The next day, I slept until I woke naturally before going to the shop to find my parents. Unexpectedly, a burly man was seen talking to her parents inside the shop. Whispers from passers-by could be heard from behind. "That lovesick butcher Gao is finally back. He probably doesn't know yet that his wife has already left." My heart skipped a beat. So it was him all along. On the day Jiang Ruan was taken away, Gao Zun was away on a long journey. Now that I've returned, I've learned that my fiancé has gone far away to the capital and is about to become part of the Earl's household. I had originally thought that Gao Zun and Jiang Ruan were probably just following their parents' arrangements and matchmakers' words, but to my surprise, Gao Zun actually rejected my mother's proposal to marry me off to him. In the evening, my parents called me to the main hall and told me about Jiang Ruan and Gao Zun's situation. Although Gao Zun was alone and had a hard life, he was honest and kind-hearted, and worked diligently in his business. My parents thought very highly of this man. They tried to persuade me, saying that Gao Zun's rejection of me was only because he couldn't accept the sudden change for the moment. If she were to find out how beautiful and gentle I am, she would surely be willing. At that moment, I truly felt the profound mystery of life. If someone had told me a few months ago that I would be rejected by two men in succession, I would never have believed it. But now, whether it's the heir of the Earl's estate or the butcher from the market, neither wants me. Darling, don't be sad, you're so wonderful. It's just that those men lack discernment. Your father and I will find you a good match. Mother tried to console me by my side. I shook my head. Don't worry, Mother and Father, I no longer wish to marry. For the past 10+ years, I had considered marrying into the Earl's household and becoming an impeccable young lady from a prestigious family as the entirety of my life. In such a short time, I suddenly faced a great upheaval. The parents I regarded as my entire world actually saw me only as a tool. As soon as their true daughter returned, they could cast me aside without hesitation. The man I considered my future husband could, in the blink of an eye, marry someone else, as if I never existed. Everything I cared about most, looking back now, was nothing but fleeting clouds. If that's the case, then the rest of my life might as well truly live it as I wish, freely and joyfully. A butcher's rejection is truly nothing. In fact, I somewhat admire his unwavering sincerity. It seems that when my parents were selecting a husband for Jiang Ruan, they truly put their hearts into it. At night, I remembered that the small trinket I bought during the day was left in my parents' room, so I got up to retrieve it. Through the window, I saw my parents sitting apart, one on the bed and the other in a chair. Just as I was about to knock, I suddenly heard my mother's gentle voice. "Old man, I wonder how Rwana is doing now. She's been wild and free since she was a child, and now that she's gone to such a big place like the capital, I don't know if she'll be bullied." After a while, my father sighed softly. "Don't worry, Rwana is so clever and lively. Everyone in the capital is bound to like her. Besides, she has her birth parents to protect her, so she definitely won't be mistreated." I don't know how long I stood outside the door, but in the end, I turned around and went back to my own room. "You can get your things tomorrow." My parents' words echoed in my mind all night. To be honest, I'm not angry, but I am jealous and envious, because I knew that the couple in the distant capital, whom I had called father and mother for over a decade, would certainly not miss me like this. "Sister, they say you know how to read." Just as I was squinting my eyes and basking in the sun in the garden, a child's voice interrupted my thoughts. I removed the leaf that was covering my eyelids. A little girl with pigtails, holding a scroll of a book in her hand, she was staring at me motionlessly. I took the scroll from her hand. The page it was opened to was Du Fu's reflections on a night journey. The stars hang low over the vast wilds. The moon surges with the great river's flow. What do I resemble? Fluttering in the wind, a solitary gull twixt heaven and earth. Originally, it was written to express a feeling of loneliness and helplessness, but now, with the passage of time and changing circumstances, I actually sense a kind of freedom that breaks through all constraints. I asked her, "Do you like reading?" The little girl nodded and said, "My mother says reading is a good thing." I was somewhat surprised. Even in the capital, many women have yet to accept the idea of reading, yet here in this small town, there are women like this. I pulled the little girl closer to my legs and asked, "What question did you want to ask me?" I told her stories from the glorious era of the Tang dynasty to the Anlushan rebellion, from the young Du Fu to the elderly Du Fu. A teardrop fell into my palm. By the time the little girl's mother came looking for her, we realized it was already late. Suddenly, I seemed to know what I should do. I wished to see the mountains and sunsets of every land, to ride a horse and pluck flowers in pursuit of freedom, and also to sow the seeds of literature and classics in more places. Life has never been easy for women in this world. If I could have some biographies of famous figures to accompany me in my remaining years, it might help alleviate the hardships that lie ahead. After I explained the plan to my parents, my father seemed hesitant. "But I've only ever heard that men can pursue scholarly honors by attending school, while for girls, the emphasis is on virtue rather than talent. My daughter, I know you've seen the world in the capital, well read in poetry and literature. Different from the girls in the countryside, but not everyone can be like you." Usually, my parents were always very reluctant to bring up my experiences in the capital, as if having me return to their side was a debt they could never repay. Their initiative in mentioning it this time shows just how difficult they consider the matter of establishing a girls' school to be. But I am not afraid. Time is the one thing I have plenty of now. If I can't accomplish it in a month, I'll take a year. If I can't accomplish it in a year, I'll take 10 years. By the time Grain Rain arrived the following year, my school for girls had officially opened. I rented a courtyard in the bustling city. My father, a skilled carpenter, personally made dozens of desks and chairs for my students. On the opening day, I ran into my old friend Gigi, the little girl who once asked me about Du Fu's poetry. Surprisingly, Gigi turned out to be the niece that Jiao Zun had taken under his wing. And it was Jiao Zun who brought her here today. It's quite amusing, really. Since coming to Gutian Town, I've run into Jiao Zun a few times, but today was the first time we actually spoke. He said I had done something unprecedented in Gutian Town. But since it's an innovative move, the road ahead is bound to be anything but smooth. If you encounter any problems while running the school in the future, feel free to ask him for help. Seeing the look of admiration on my face, Jiao Zun gave a simple, honest smile. What? Do you think I'm wrong? I shook my head. I'm just surprised by your broad perspective and open-mindedness, not like a street butcher at all. I recalled what my parents had said. Jiao Zun had only come to Gutian Town in the past 2 years, so where was he before that, and what experiences did he have? A month later, Jiao Zun came to me for the second time. Looking at the vast courtyard, he chuckled wryly. With only 2 students, you still teach with such calm and composure. I smiled faintly. What does it matter if there are only 2? If I can add some color to these 2 girls' lives, it won't be in vain. Running a school for girls is not easy. People are not very accepting of girls attending school. I had expected that not many children would come. Otherwise, I could go around the town and visit more families, talk to their parents, so we can have more children. I shook my head and declined his kindness. People's beliefs cannot be changed overnight, and my abilities are limited. I only help those who are willing to learn. But Jiao Zun was not someone who would listen obediently. In private, he stubbornly visited households with school-age girls and offered to provide them with a free lunch. For every full month of reading, the child would also receive 2 pounds of pork as a reward. These children were already quite young and couldn't do much work at home. Now that such a good opportunity had come along, the children instantly filled all the tables and chairs prepared by their fathers. At noon, they watched Jiao Zun serving meals to the children in front of the large iron pot. I couldn't help but ponder again. What are you thinking about? After washing the kitchenware, Sister Hua patted me. I was wondering, Jiao Zun, has he always been so warm-hearted? Ha! Sister Li laughed and sighed. That's for sure. Back then, Gigi's father and I encountered him in a heavy snowstorm. He was covered in blood, on the verge of death. I was initially too scared to save him, but fortunately, Gigi's father insisted. We truly ended up saving a very good man. So, what's the story with his marriage to Jiang Guan? Ah, that matter. Hua Soro looked a bit awkward, stammering as she began to change the subject. I understood. It seemed there was more to the story. After all the students had left, I asked Hua Soro to stay behind alone. The number of students is increasing. The age gap is also growing wider. If I teach the same content to all of them, I'm afraid the children's ability to absorb the material will vary. But if I teach different things, I can't be in multiple places at once and won't be able to handle it all. So I thought I could first teach Sister Hua the lessons intended for the younger children a day in advance. The next day, Hua Soro would teach the children. I would give Hua Soro an additional payment so it wouldn't interfere with her family's livelihood. Me, Hua Soro looked surprised. Am I capable? Of course, I encouraged her. The fact that you have the awareness to let your daughter study and learn to read already puts you ahead of many others. The content for young children isn't difficult, and you'll be just fine. Hua Soro blushed. Actually, it wasn't my idea. It's just that Gigi often hangs around Jiao Zun and has picked up some knowledge from him. I didn't think it was a bad thing, so I didn't stop her. So that's how it is. So, that day when Gigi came to ask me about poetry, it must have been Jiao Zun's doing, right? 2 years passed in this manner. Nowadays, Hua Seol can confidently stand on the podium and teach the young girls about Li Bai's heroic spirit and Su Shi's optimistic outlook on life. Not only Sister Hua, some of the older students could also serve as my assistants, teaching the knowledge they had learned to the younger ones. Gradually, I watched as these once childish and unruly little girls became well-mannered, refined, and elegant in their behavior. Suddenly, I found myself troubled again. What if they get bullied in the future? I set my sights on Jiao Zun. A few days later, a new course was added to the original curriculum for the older girls, women's self-defense. I saw it coming. Although Jiao Zun was simple and diligent, his demeanor and speech were far from that of an ordinary butcher in the marketplace. He seemed to carry many secrets that could not be easily shared with others. I had no intention of probing into the details. All I needed to know was that he was a good man in Gutian Town. His martial arts and wealth, as long as they can be used for the children, that is enough. Jiang Wu, you owe me far too much. He narrowed his eyes at me. Let's set aside the students' meals for now, but even though we're both hired as teachers, you only pay Hua Seol and not me. Isn't that unfair? I didn't answer but instead asked, what kind of girl is Jiang Guan? He didn't seem to expect that I would suddenly ask this question. The pancake got stuck in my throat, and I started coughing uncontrollably, struggling to catch my breath. Why are you suddenly asking about this? Nothing, it's just that I've been in Gutian Town for a few years now, but everyone seems to deliberately avoid mentioning Jiang Guan in front of me. I'm a bit curious. You suddenly lost the fiancé you were so fond of. Have you ever thought about winning her back? Jiao Zun looked up at the moon. The night sky stretched boundlessly. Yet there was no trace of disappointment in his eyes. Instead, a faint smile touched the corners of his lips. Marrying into the Earl's household is far better than marrying a country butcher. She has a brighter future ahead. How could I selfishly stand in her way? I sighed inwardly, thinking how truly devoted he was. And what about you? He retorted, from being the future daughter-in-law of the Earl's household to now being the tofu beauty. Surrounded by a bunch of children every day, don't you feel any regret? Regretful? I had asked myself the same question. In the capital, I was punished by my mother to kneel in the snow because the small regular script I wrote was not delicate enough. Snow piled up on my shoulders, a full foot deep. Before I was allowed to return, even though my hands were frostbitten, I still had to practice writing every day, not a single sheet less. My daily meals were strictly rationed. And no matter how much I liked the food, I couldn't have an extra bite. For every pound I gained, I would be punished with a day of fasting. Before attending every high society banquet, I would exhaust all my efforts, from clothing and accessories to conversations and smiles. I feared making any mistake that would lead to ridicule from the distinguished guests at the banquet. Losing the Jiang family's face also meant losing the marriage alliance with the Earl's household. But now, every breath I take is filled with freedom. I can laugh and speak as I please, living according to my own wishes. Though my clothing and meals are simple, the people I interact with are genuine and sincere. What regrets could there be? Jiang Wu, such a temperament as yours is truly rare. He couldn't conceal the admiration in his eyes, but to me, these words meant little. It was merely a drowning person finding a glimmer of hope and desperately clinging to it. I wonder how Jiang Guan is doing in the capital these days. As the weather turned colder and frost appeared, Mother slipped and fell while grinding tofu early in the morning. She injured her bone. I cleaned a cloth and carefully wiped her face, then brought her meals. Mother smiled with joy in her eyes. Sighing over having such a thoughtful and caring daughter, it suddenly occurred to me, back in the capital, there was a time when Mother was severely ill with a high fever, 4 days and nights. I stayed by her bedside, never even changing my clothes, yet Mother never once praised me, and now, with just some daily care, Mother is already deeply moved. I continued washing her with a smile. Mother, There's no need to be so polite with your own daughter. Mother was slightly taken aback, then nodded with tears in her eyes. After a while, she also held my hand that was wringing the cloth. Then you must also promise me that in front of your parents. There's no need to restrain yourself or pretend to be sensible. My eyes grew warm. Since I returned to my biological parents, they have treated me with boundless affection and never questioned or hindered any of my actions. Yet there has always been a lack of intimacy between us, the kind that close relatives share. I never expected that the estrangement and distance from our years apart would finally dissolve on a winter morning like this. The room was filled with warmth when suddenly a child from the college shouted that someone was looking for me. It turned out that Ching, who had left our college to get married, had beaten up her husband. Back at the college, after hearing the whole story, I couldn't help but laugh heartily. I retorted to Auntie Zhao, who had come to make trouble, "What did Ching do wrong?" When Auntie Zhao saw me laughing, she became even angrier, breathing heavily. As a woman, how could she lay hands on her own man? What have you been teaching these girls? But before I could respond, Ching directly cursed. It's bad enough that he came home dead drunk, but the pigs, cows, and sheep at home haven't even been fed yet. After coming back, he kept complaining about my cooking. I'd say I was merciful not to splash his face with that scalding rice porridge. Isn't it perfectly natural for a man to scold a woman? Old Lady Zhao stubbornly defended her son. Ching snorted with a cold laugh. That might be normal for you, but now that I've entered this family, such things are absolutely not allowed. If Zhao dares to act like a big shot in front of me again, I'll beat him up every single time. Ching's eyes turned cold as she spoke, and she meant every word. Aunt Zhao didn't dare to say anything for a moment. Later, I heard that under Ching's strict supervision and urging, Zhao working diligently every day and doing business steadily. Life is getting better and better. Having witnessed the benefits of fierce Ching, Aunt Zhao gradually became more assertive in front of her own husband. Somehow, the reputation of Gutian town women for their strong personalities had spread far and wide. Yet this did not limit their marriage prospects. On the contrary, more and more people hoped to marry the women of Gutian town. I cannot help those whose lives are already set in stone to step out of Gutian, but I believe that in the future, their children should be able to live more fulfilling lives, and these young children, reciting their lessons aloud, should have more possibilities for their future. I originally thought that life would just continue like this, day after day, except for my insistence on not marrying, which earned me some nagging from my parents. The rest of the time was quiet and uneventful. But one day, a man on horseback knocked open the academy's gate. Steward Bai. I froze. Since leaving the Jiang residence, I had not seen Steward Bai again. Seeing him arrive covered in dust and looking weary, I knew something major must have happened. My mind raced, but I trembled with fear. Is grandmother unwell? Steward Bai pressed his lips tightly together and nodded. The old madam is fading fast. Before she passes, she wishes to see you, young lady. I don't know how I managed to run home and pack my things. By the time I came to my senses, the carriage had already traveled dozens of miles outside the city. Anxious and restless, I forced Steward Bai to travel day and night, finally arriving at the Jiang residence on a misty, hazy morning. My former father and mother sat high in the main hall. Our eyes met, yet we were both at a loss for words. I truly did not know how to address the person before me. Enough. Lord Jiang waved his hand wearily. Go see your grandmother first, and comfort her well. Upon receiving the order, I hurriedly ran toward my grandmother's courtyard. Memories of 15 years of life automatically restarted. I went to my grandmother's house with ease, knelt before her bed, and apologized to her. I came too late. I had made my grandmother, at such an advanced age, struggle to hold on just to wait for me. Grandmother, Wu is unfilial. Grandmother curved her pale lips into a smile and reached out to pat my head. Life was difficult before, in order to be a qualified daughter-in-law of the Earl's household. I endured countless hardships and strived to improve myself. Only grandmother was the one who truly cared for and cherished me. A few years ago when I left the Jiang residence, I didn't even have time to bid farewell to my grandmother before being hastily forced onto the carriage to Gutian town. During these years in Gutian, I've prayed to the moon countless times, sending distant wishes for my grandmother's health and happiness, yet could only bury my longing deep within. Fortunately, we have been granted another day to meet again. Because of my arrival, grandmother's spirits gradually improved, and along with it, her physical condition began to shed its previous aged appearance. Therefore, father asked me to stay in the mansion first, to serve and accompany grandmother well. Although father rarely involved himself in the affairs of the inner household, his reputation for filial piety was widely known. I knew of his cold-blooded ruthlessness. Yet he cared deeply about his reputation, but in my heart, I truly could not bear to leave grandmother. So I stayed, serving him medicine day after day. Unexpectedly, I learned surprising news. Jiang Guan had not married into the count's household, according to Linga, who once served by my side. After Jiang Guan returned, my father and mother painstakingly educated and raised her. Virtues and talents, whether in music, chess, calligraphy, or painting, are not achieved in a single day. When Jiang Guan attended the flower viewing banquet hosted by Princess Shengyang, her painting of peonies was rather unremarkable. While chatting and laughing with others at the banquet, she carelessly inquired about matters concerning the Pingyang Count's residence and even casually added a few comments. All of this eventually reached the ears of the Countess. A few days later, the Countess personally visited the Jiang family. In her words, she subtly implied that Jiang Guan was lacking in virtue and that Jiang's father and mother had failed in teaching their daughter properly. That day, my father and mother knew that the marriage alliance with the Earl's family was completely lost. I let out a sigh. The world has always been harsh on women. I have been cautious in my words and actions for over a decade, and even then, I barely met the Earl's family's standards. Jiang Guan had grown accustomed to a life of indulgence and freedom. Naturally, it was difficult for her to adapt, but in the capital, how could a woman who had been rejected by the Earl's family ever lead a smooth life? Did grandmother not speak up for Jiang Guan? I asked Linga. The reason I was able to gain the attention of the Earl's household ahead of the many noble ladies in the capital was because my grandmother and the Dowager Countess were close friends since childhood. They had made a pact in their youth that their children would marry each other in the future. Unfortunately, both of them gave birth to sons. The two of them discussed it and decided that only the grandchildren would do. By the time it came to the grandchildren, the social status of the two families had already diverged too much. However, neither of the younger generations dared to defy the wishes of the two elderly ladies, and so, the marriage between me and the heir was settled. Linga shook her head and leaned close to my ear. The master and mistress have pleaded with the old madam several times, but she acts as if she hasn't heard a word. My nose stung with emotion. Grandmother is standing up for me. What about Jiang Guan now? Linga said that during that time, wherever Jiang Guan went, she was mocked by others. She was just a girl raised in the countryside, yet she dared to dream of marrying into a count's mansion. Her father and mother grew anxious. They even issued orders, demanding that she cultivate her virtues and skills day and night, honing her abilities diligently. Jiang Guan was pushed to the brink of suffocation. Finally, when she cut her finger while playing the piano, she had a fierce argument with the master and mistress. What you want is not your own daughter at all. What you want is merely a tool to help you climb the ladder of officialdom. I've had enough. I don't want to stay in this house anymore. Linga exaggeratedly imitated Jiang Guan's manner. Even though I clearly knew that Jiang Guan was already safe and sound in the capital at this moment, I still couldn't help but open my mouth wide upon hearing this. And what happened after that? Linga took a sip of water and continued with her story. Jiang Guan packed her bags several times, wanting to escape, but each time she was caught by the servants her father had sent to watch over her, in utter despair. Jiang Guan finally held a knife to her own throat, threatening her father to let her leave. Her father was both furious and shocked, yet his words were chillingly cold. The Jiang family can have a daughter who is dead, but we will never allow a daughter who is immoral and runs away. From then on, in the imperial court, wouldn't I have to endure people pointing fingers at my back for the rest of my life? Finally, my desperate father and mother began to think of me. That daughter who always obeyed them and never defied them. They even entertained the thought of bringing me back from thousands of miles away, and tactfully conveyed this intention to the countess. Upon hearing this, the countess asked whether the Jiang family regarded her as a joke, or intended to make a mockery of the Pingyang Count's estate. Was their household gate something that Lord Jiang could allow anyone to enter as he pleased? The couple's faces turned pale and red alternately from the mockery. From then on, she no longer dared to dream of a marriage into the Earl's household. If the Earl's household didn't want her, naturally no other noble family would dare to take her either. After 2 years of silence, the capital gradually forgot that the Jiang family had such a recovered daughter. No one mentioned Jiang Guan at banquets anymore. As long as she didn't attend banquets, Jiang Guan gradually adapted to life here. This year, her father made the decision to marry Jiang Guan off to a scholar he favored. Perhaps the noble ladies were too curious about the story of the switched identities between me and Jiang Guan. Even the artists who created picture books began crafting stories about the two of us. Soon, both Jiang Guan and I received invitations from Princess Shengyang. We were asked to attend the spring banquet together. My first meeting with Jiang Guan after returning to the capital was at this spring banquet. Jiang Guan arrived earlier than I did. When I arrived, she was surrounded by people. I quietly listened for a few moments. Every word was filled with sarcasm. Jiang Guan's face was already flushed with anger, yet she held back from speaking out. I suppose her years in the capital had taught her that much. This is not like Gutian. A single careless word could offend someone she cannot afford to cross. Her husband has only recently made the list. Any person at the banquet, with a casual remark, could ruin her husband's future. How dare she throw a tantrum? But I no longer have any reservations, and I can't stand to watch any longer. Miss He, Miss Jo, it's been years. You both have grown even more radiant. Everyone turned around and saw me standing behind them. Speaking, after a moment of thought, I remembered that I, too, had once been part of their social circle. Jiang Wu. It's time to change how you address us, a close friend from the past quietly reminded me. Indeed, several years have passed. The young ladies of the past must now be young madams in their respective households. However, having been away for so long, I can no longer match the names to the faces. I can't be bothered to distinguish them either. Jiang Guan heard the words of the crowd and also saw me. The gaze directed at me was extremely complex. We stared at each other across the crowd for a long time. They say you're the real and fake young ladies, but you don't look alike at all. The voice of Princess Shengyang came through, breaking the laughter and chatter of the crowd. I turned around to look. Standing beside the princess was another person, the heir of the Pingyang Earl's household, Gu, my former betrothed. It had been years since we last met, the once gentle and refined heir. Now, his brows are etched with the weariness and resolve of time. It was only after I returned to the capital that I heard how, over these past few years, the heir had followed General Wei Bei into the military. On the battlefield, he earned merit after merit in the heat of battle. Even without these achievements, relying solely on his royal connections and inherited title, Gu could have easily looked down upon everyone in the capital. Yet he was uneasy with this unearned glory. He had earned his reputation through bloodshed on the battlefield, silencing all the critics. I couldn't help but admire him. At this thought, I suddenly realized, it turns out that the man I worked so hard to marry was not just a useless pretty face. Unfortunately, fate's arrangements are not something we can control. After the banquet, Jiang Guan pulled me aside to talk privately, perhaps because of our unique connection, even though it was only our second meeting. We don't feel like strangers between us. She asked how my parents were doing in Gutian town. I answered in detail, telling her not to worry. I asked her how life in the capital was. If she's truly unhappy, I have a way to take her away from here and return to Gutian town. But seeing the overflowing affection and admiration for her husband in her expression, and then gently stroking her belly with tenderness, I already knew the answer. Jiang Guan had found her own ties. She was no longer the Jiang Guan of Gutian town. After talking with Jiang Guan, I took a small path hoping to leave early. Unexpectedly, someone blocked my way. I was slightly stunned and bowed to Ji Yu. He raised his hand to signal me to rise. During my campaign, I passed by a small town. I heard there was a girls' school in the town, taught by a noble lady from the capital. The brothers in the military camp found this amusing, so they secretly went to take a look. Guess what, Miss Jiang? A slight stir arose in my heart. Back when I was with the Jiang family, others, out of respect for the Earl's household, often sent me invitations. Ji Yu and I had also crossed paths several times at various banquets. However, bound by propriety and reputation, we had never spoken alone. If Ji Yu had seen me in Gutian town, he would naturally have recognized me, but he didn't bring it up back then. So why is he bringing up these past events today? I didn't understand his intentions. So I remained silent and didn't respond. The engagement with Jiang Guan was called off at my request to my mother. I looked up, confused. I had thought that the reason for this marriage was the Countess's pride, that she could not tolerate someone with flaws entering the Count's household. But I never expected it was Ji Yu. What about you, Jiang Wu? Are you married? I don't know if it's because of his years in the military, but Ji Yu now speaks so directly. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he has feelings for me? If not yet, I interrupted him. If not yet, does the heir intend to marry me? He caught the sarcasm in my words, raised an eyebrow, and retorted, do you think I can't do it? I came to the capital this time only to see my grandmother and had no intention of causing unnecessary trouble, so I laid it out plainly to him. I shook my head. It's not that I think the heir can't do it, but rather, even if you marry me, what benefit would that bring me? Ji Yu's expression was cold and stern. Do you think the Earl's estate is not worthy of you? Of course not. In the past, I was cautious in my words and actions, and it was only because of the close friendship between our two grandmothers that I was fortunate enough to catch the eye of the Earl's estate. But the world is full of hardships and the road ahead is long. Who can guarantee that I won't make a careless mistake in the future? By then, my grandmother will have passed away, who will protect me from being abandoned by the Earl's estate. Even if I'm not abandoned, you, the heir, are noble and precious. Once you grow tired of me and take in 3 or 5 concubines, my parents, bound by their pride and status, won't stand up for me. I can only become the laughingstock of the capital once again. After hearing this, Ji Yu was momentarily stunned. Then, he let out a helpless laugh. I never thought that Ji Yu, would turn out to be a pit of fire that people dare not leap into. I smiled faintly. There's no need for the young master to be so modest. My ambitions lie elsewhere, but there are plenty of young ladies who admire you. Ji Yu waved his hand, indicating that I needn't flatter him. At this point, everyone's intentions were quite clear. I was not the one he was determined to marry, however. A few years of tranquil and carefree life in the countryside have made me somewhat different from the women around him today. He was momentarily captivated. carrying with him the regret of having almost married me once. This layered into the inexplicable fondness he feels today, but in a few days, he will come to his senses. I am not a suitable match for him, of course. He is not the one my heart yearns for either. In just a few months, I have grown weary of life in the capital. I desperately want to escape, but what about grandmother? How could I bear to part with her? After tossing and turning all night, I went early the next morning to pay my respects to
Always be completely unreserved with my grandmother. Then you should explain it to me properly. I am not unaware that Jiao-zun has feelings for me. I am not resistant to Jiao-zun either, but his origins and background are all unclear. He has too many secrets he hasn't told me. Now I only wish to live my life as lightly as drifting clouds and flowing water. If he doesn't speak of them, I won't ask. Life is already so difficult. I don't want to force it. Grandmother nodded, showing her understanding. With my experience and knowledge, I could still see the difference between Jiao-zun and the people around him. How could my grandmother, having experienced so much in life, not see that beneath Jiao-zun's rustic exterior lay another true self? But my grandmother couldn't help advising me, if you realize this is a quagmire, you should extricate yourself early. Don't foolishly invest too much emotion. Only when you finally want to leave will you discover you're already deeply trapped. Two people's past affection was needlessly hurt. At night, I tossed and turned. Grandmother's words lingered in my heart. Life continued to pass as peacefully as before, on the Double Ninth Festival. I took the children from the college to climb the mountain in the outskirts of Gutian town. The autumn air was crisp and refreshing. Under the azure sky, golden leaves fluttered like butterflies. Jiao-zun, after playing with the children for a while, came looking for me. After sitting down beside me, he magically produced a bouquet of wildflowers from behind his back. The wildflowers were vibrant and colorful, reflecting Jiao-zun's smiling face. Flower Auntie said all the girls love flowers. So I picked a bouquet for you too. Looking at the flowers, a surge of courage welled up in my heart for no reason. Jiang Wu, be brave one more time. Your life should be led by yourself. I took the flowers and looked at Jiao-zun across from me. Jiao-zun, I'll only ask once, do you have any secrets you're hiding from me? Jiao-zun's smile instantly froze on his face. A gentle breeze blows. I count down silently in my heart. Jiao-zun, I'm only giving you this one chance. If fate doesn't bring us together, then so be it. Count down to the last number. I sighed and handed the flowers back to Jiao-zun. In that case, Jiao-zun, let's just be ordinary fellow villagers from now on. Wooer, Jiao-zun's voice came from behind me. I'll tell you everything. I had long seen that Jiao-zun was not of a butcher's background, but I never would have thought that he was actually the emperor's son. Jiao-zun smiled bitterly. Wooer, if you are afraid and no longer wish to be near me, I will not hold it against you. I never would have imagined that we were both in the capital city back then. I had no idea that the court at that time was already fraught with unpredictable schemes. Jiao-zun was merely an ordinary prince, yet he had reached a point where he was no longer tolerated. His mother, Consort Hui, in order to save his life, arranged for him to join the military campaign. With the help of trusted allies from his maternal clan within the army, they fabricated the illusion that he had died in battle. Yet even so, for several years after his death, he was still being hunted down. It wasn't until he was accidentally saved by Aunt Hua's family that the pursuit ceased. Perhaps his enemies had finally become convinced that he was truly dead. Only then did he no longer have to live a life on the run. When he was rescued by Sister Hua, his face was covered with festering sores. He took the opportunity to find a folk remedy to alter his appearance, completely changing his looks. He deliberately ate more fatty meat to make himself gain a lot of weight. With an apron tied around his waist and a butcher's knife in hand, he finally had a new identity. Gutian town was already a remote small town, with few high-ranking officials or nobles visiting. Jiao-zun could finally live a stable life. What about your marriage with Jiang Guan? I asked my second question. Oh, this. Jiao-zun's face turned red. Little did they know, the reason was even more laughable at that time. Jiang Guan was washing clothes by the river, but she slipped and fell into the water. Jiang Guan was not a good swimmer and immediately screamed in terror. Jiao Zun happened to be passing by and jumped into the water to rescue her. Little did he expect that saving the girl would mean taking responsibility for her. To protect Jiang Guan's reputation and to have a legitimate reason to stay in Gutian town, Jiao Zun accepted my parents' proposal of marriage, but unexpectedly, Jiang Guan didn't like him at all. To escape the marriage, Jiang Guan packed her belongings and fled Gutian town. However, on the road, she encountered my father, who was on a business trip. Seeing the jade pendant and birthmark on Jiang Guan, my father immediately concluded that she was their long-lost daughter, and so the story unfolded. Seeing me lost in thought and silent, Jiao Zun grew somewhat anxious. "Wooer, what are you thinking?" I chuckled lightly. "You are no longer a prince of the capital, and I am no longer the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family. Let's forget all of that completely. From now on, you are Jiao Zun the butcher, and I am Jiang Guan from the academy. You slaughter pigs, I teach, and together we will work hard to live happily with grandmother, father, mother, and the children." As if he hadn't expected me to resolve his heavy past with just a few words. Jiao Zun was stunned. After a moment, he suddenly burst into laughter. Seeing how cheerful and happy he was, I couldn't help but laugh too. Having seen prosperity and wealth, weathered great storms and challenges, finally, the journey of life, even if adrift, what does it resemble? We can still be a pair of free sandpipers, roaming between heaven and earth.